Hello, future lawmakers. Welcome back to another insightful session of Focus Lexicon. We were doing the case law series for our CS Professional Labor Laws and Practice subject, and we have completed our cases up to case number 11, that was State of Kerala versus VM Patel, and we were on chapter number 3. So why we are studying the case laws? Because doctrine of paramateria says then when there are two parallel laws in the country, all the cases that are principle based case law, that are doctrine based case law, they are still valid. However, the limit based case laws, new limits will be applicable, but still you have to take a note because new rules are not yet implemented. So you have to study these case laws. So we have prepared this case laws compiler along with the index. So make sure you are writing your page numbers in the case law index and you are studying these case laws. So let's continue. The next case is State of Kerala versus R.E. D'Souza, Supreme Court of India. Facts of the case concerned with whether certain categories of laborer qualifies as workers under the Factories Act 1948. Two situations examined: day laborer, no evidence of freedom to come and go at will. Then workers and girls peeling washing prawns, worked irregular hours, no control over attendance, moved between the premises. Now whether they will qualify as worker or not. Issues involved: what is the test for determining the worker status? Does irregular, uncontrolled or casual works fall within the statutory definition? Then court held that day laborers held to be the workers, absence of evidence showing that freedom to work at will and meant employment relationship exist. What is the primary thing to check whether the person is worker or not? There should be control over him, like whether he is controlled by his employer or not. Employer is telling that you have to do this work and you have to give this work by this time. If employer is having absolute control and supervision over the work, then the person will qualify as worker. However, the women and girls peeling washing prawns, they were working independently, like they were just doing their work and there was no control or supervision over them, so they will not qualify as worker. Then court held that women and girls peeling prawns, not workers, no specified hours, no control by employers, liberty to work elsewhere. Principal: control and supervision by employer is the decisive in determining worker status. Day laborers held to be the worker, women and girls peeling prawns, not workers, no specified hours, without control no worker, with control employment exists. So this is the key factor determining that if there is supervision and control by the employer over the employees, then they will qualify as worker, otherwise they will not qualify as worker. So write down the page number here. It is also on page number 4. So like this you have to complete this index. It will be a really good exercise for you, and I have left this exercise for you. So you have to write down page numbers. Make sure you are writing the page numbers in regularly. So next case is Birdi Chand Sharma versus First Civil Judge Nagpur. Facts of the case: respondents prepared BDs inside the factory premises. They were not permitted to work at home. Factories hour fixed, but workers had liberty to come and go during those hours. Attendance was noted: no worker allowed to work after midday or between 7, factories closing. Standing order: absence for 8 days without leave. Then stands to removal. Payment made on piece rate basis, with management retaining the right to reject the substandard BDs. Whether BD rollers working under these conditions qualify as workers under section 2(1) of Factories Act. Sir, they will qualify as worker, na? They have provided them all the restrictions. They have put all the restrictions on them. They are not permitted to work from home. Their hours are fixed. Their attendance was noted. And if they are absent for 8 days, then it will cause to removal. Then they are working on piece rate basis. Now, this is the determining factor. They are not employed on wages or salary. They are employed on piece rate basis. But sir, this is irrelevant. Na? This is irrelevant. You have put all the conditions that are putting a restriction on their movement. They are not working independently. They are working for the employer. They are working under his control, his supervision. He is directing them, he is guiding them, and he has to work as per the instruction of your employer only. So court held that respondents were workers under section 2(1). Reasons: they worked within the factory premises and hours. Attendance was recorded. Employers retained control over the quality and standards. Piece rate payment does not negate the worker status if control and supervision exists. So what is the primary factor for determining the status that person is worker or not? That control and supervision should be there. Like piece rate plus factory control is equal to worker status. Inside factory walls, BD rollers are workers. Then next is piece rate worker status under the Factories Act. Shankar Balaji Vajay versus State of Maharashtra. Court held that piece rate workers can be workers under the Act. Conditions: they must be regular workers, not those who come and work at their own sweet will. Emphasizes continuity and control of employment relationship. Like regular worker should be there, not who like come and go and work at their own sweet will. So worker will be a person who is working regularly and under the directions of his employer. Then Birdi Chand Sharma versus First Civil Judge Nagpur. Workers in BD factory paid on piece rate basis. They were free to work within the factory hours, but employer retained control over the quality, rejecting substandard BDs. Court held that they were workers. Principle: supervision and control matters more than mode of wage payment. Employers' right to direct what work is and how it is done. Wages by piece or time control makes them worker. General principle: whether the workers are under employer supervision and control, irrelevant whether wages are paid on time rate or piece rate. Next is Works Manager, Central Railway Workshop, Jhansi versus Vishwanath and others. Facts of the case: concerned with the scope of definition of worker under section 2(1) of Factories Act 1948. Whether the person engaged in cleaning machinery, premises or incidental work qualifies as worker. Is worker limited only to those directly engaged in manufacturing process, or the employees who are engaged in works which are incidental to your original manufacturing process, whether they will qualify as worker or not? So question is that. So conclusion: court held that definition of worker is fairly wide. It includes not only the person employed in the manufacturing process, but also those cleaning machineries or premises used for manufacturing, those engaged in the work incidental or connected with the manufacturing process. Principal protection under the Act extends beyond the direct production to ancillary activities essential to factory operations. Worker is a person, anyone engaged in manufacturing or connected incidental processes. Factory protection covers more than just production. Like those employees who are engaged directly in production, they are workers. But if anyone is engaged in a work which is ancillary to the or incidental to the main production work, then he will also qualify as worker. Then next is, so let's write the page numbers here first. Up to case number 13, they are written on page number 4, and 14, 15 and 18 up to 18 they are written on page number 5. So make sure, my dear friends, you are writing this page numbers. This is very, very important. Okay, so please write this page number. Up to 13 it was on page number 4, and from case number 14 onwards they are on page number 5. Okay, so it is a very good exercise that you can do. You can mark page numbers. Next is Shinde versus Bombay Telephones. Facts of the case: concerned with whether persons working outside the factory premises but connected within the factory business qualifies as worker. Does physical presence inside the factory matters, or is connection with the factory business sufficient? Conclusion: court held that whether workman stands outside or inside the factory premises, if duties are connected with the business of factory, he is employed in connection with the factory. Worker status extends to the connected and incidental activities and not just direct manufacturing. Next is your Bharat Fridge Werner Limited versus State of Karnataka. Concerned with whether running a canteen in a factory is part of factory activity, court held that running a canteen is incidental activity of a factory necessary for its functioning. Person employed in the canteen are therefore covered under the definition of worker. Factory work includes its business and its canteen also. Then next is Indian Petrochemicals Corporation Limited versus Shramik Sena and others. Concerned whether the employees of statutory canteen in a factory are workmen of the establishment. Issue arose under the Factories Act 1948. Do canteen workers automatically becomes employees of the factory establishment, or is there any status limited to Factories Act context? Like there are two situations now. If there is a mandatory canteen, or there is a private canteen. If there is a mandatory canteen by law, by Factories Act or by OSHWC, like if there is a provision for mandatory canteen, then workers employed under this mandatory canteen, they will be also considered as worker. And all the benefits will be available for them. However, in private canteen which is operating independently, they will not qualify as worker, because the private canteen is independently operating and there is no obligation by law. So conclusion: court held that workmen of a statutory canteen are workmen of the establishment only for the purpose of Factories Act. For other purpose, they are not employees unless it is proved that establishment exercise complete administrative control over them. Key test: existence of master service relationship, and principle that statutory obligation to run a canteen does not automatically extend full employment relationship beyond the act. So for the purpose of Factories Act, for the purpose of OSHWC code, they will be considered worker. Canteen workers are employees only within the Factories Act scope unless full control exists. Canteen staffs are worker but only within the factories law. If there is any mandate under factories law and your canteen is established as per that mandate, then the workers working in that canteen, they will be counted as they will be covered under the definition of worker only. They will be covered under the definition of worker only. Then next is worker case example: gas works coolie digging, trenching outside factory for laying pipes, not workers. Then the person who was digging trenches outside the factory for laying pipes, they were not held workers because this is not directly incidental to your manufacturing process. This is an independent work. Then supplying materials to masons and engaged in furnace construction, they are workers. Incidental connected with manufacturing process. Soap workers, carpenter. Preparing packing cases, workers, packing, incidental to manufacturing process. Then clerical staffs like munim, accountant employed in the factory. Thus even a munim in a factory is a worker. So anything that is incidental to your main manufacturing process, any work that is incidental to your main manufacturing process, that will be covered under your worker status. That will be covered under your worker status. So anything that is incidental directly to your manufacturing process, any person is included in that, that will be covered under your definition of worker. Next is Rohtas Industries Limited versus Ram Lakhan Singh and others concerned with a person employed in a paper factory. His duties was to supervising and checking the quality and weighment of the waste papers and rags, basic raw materials or paper manufacture, handling receipts, maintaining stocks, records and pasting and passing supplier bills. So this work is directly incidental. From the facts itself, it is clear that it is directly incidental. Whether he works in the presence of the factory and occasionally inside the factory when required. So he was working outside the factory but within the limited area of the factory premises. Whether such an employee is engaged in supervising raw material processes qualifies as worker under section 2(1) of the Factories Act. Court held that he was worker under the act. He worked in the factory premises precincts. His duties were directly connected with the subject of the manufacturing process, raw material. Employment connected with raw material handling and preparation within the factory precincts fall within the definition of worker. Raw material supervision is factory work. Raw material supervision is factory work. Then next case is Elango M and others versus Madras Refineries Limited, Madras High Court. Do statutory canteen employees automatically become full employees of the establishment, or is there any limited or their status is limited to Factories Act context? Court held that employees of a statutory canteen are workmen of the establishment only for the purpose of Factories Act. They are not workmen for all other purposes unless complete administrative control by the establishment is proved. Canteen workers only within the Factories Act scope. Statutory canteen staff workers but only within the factory law. Then for the purpose of Factories Act only, they will be considered workers. Okay. Then Haldia Refineries Canteen Employees Union and others versus Indian Oil Corporation Limited and others. Facts of the case: respondent corporation or IOC ran a statutory canteen through a contractor. Workmen employed by the contractor claim regularization in service of IOC. Then corporation's role exercised oversight to ensure canteen efficiency but did not reimburse wages. Two settlements existed between the contractor and canteen workmen. IOC was not a party. Issues involved: are canteen employees automatically workmen of the corporation for all the purposes? Does statutory obligation to run a canteen create a full master service relationship? So the answer is very much clear. Claim for regularization is not sustainable. IOC's control was limited to ensuring efficient running of the canteen. No wage reimbursement by IOC. Settlements were between the contractor and workmen, not IOC. So for the purpose of Factories Act only, they are considered workers. But for the purpose of their remuneration, for the purpose of their payment, bonus, wages, they will be not covered under that codes, because they can be employed independently also, and they can be employed as within their statutory rules also. Like full establishment control means what? Full establishment control means what? Like if there is any industry, it has canteen. Okay, it has canteen. Now full canteen is controlled by this premises only, like who will be employed, who will not be employed, and what kind of materials will be provided. Other than option number 2 is they have hired a contractor. The contractor gives contract to multiple canteens. Now this contractor and these canteens, the agreement is between them. Agreement is not between canteen and them. Okay, so for the purpose of factories law, they will be considered worker, but for the purpose of code on wages and payment of gratuity and all that, they will be not considered worker. However, if the canteen is directly controlled by the premises, then it will be covered under each and every law. So for the purpose, like they are hired on contract wages, so they will be not covered under your definition of workers. Next is whether all the employees are workers. Harbans Lal versus State of Karnataka. Court clarified that all workers under the Act are employees, but not all employees are the workers. Employee is broader, worker is narrower, tied to factories connection. Union of India versus GM Kokil. Court held that all persons employed in or in connection with a factory, whether or not employed as worker, are entitled to benefits of this act. Principles benefit extend beyond strict worker definitions to anyone connected with factory operations. Worker definition is narrow, employee definition is broader. Benefits extend widely. Factory law protects all the connected hands. Then next is Praful Bhai Patadia versus the state. Once premises is prima facie established as factory, section 103 presumption of employment applies. Onus shift to accused to prove contrary. Principal burden of proof lies on employer accused once factory status is shown. Then next is general principle. Worker definition is wide but not identical to employees. Benefits of the act 2 extends to all the persons employed or in connection with the factory operations. Presumption of employment favors workers once factory status is established. Then your next case is meaning of premises and precincts under the Factories Act. Premises, generic term, open land, land with building or building alone, that is premises. Precincts, usually understood as space enclosed by walls. Premises including precincts does not mean premises must always have precincts. Words including enlarge the scope of premises. Example, railway line construction, each phase length treated as factory. Then principle, company engaged in construction of railway line is a factory. For example, like it is not required that your factory should be a boundary walls and all that is covered under a factory. For example, a company is engaged in railway line construction. Constructing a railway line does not have any defined scope of area, like it can be of n numbers of kilometer. So that company working anywhere doing the primary work will be considered as your factory, Then KV V. Sharma versus State of Madras defines precincts as a space enclosed by walls or fences, clarified a place solely used for some purpose other than manufacturing purpose, carried on in a factory workshop does not constitute a factory. Principle, precincts must be connected with factory process to qualify. Like all the areas covered, all the boundaries covered near your factories, these are all your precincts. If they are used for the purpose that is directly connected to the process of manufacturing. For example, you have parked trucks in your precincts that are used for carrying your goods and your parcel and dockets. So that is also covered under the precincts. Okay. Then security offices, you have established a security office nearby, that is also covered under the precincts. Then there is a boundary wall against that, then it is also a precincts. The factories, all the machines inside the factory, all the machines and related area, that are all covered under your precincts of the factory. Like areas, these are covered, this will also be covered under your precincts. Then next is then external yards and your godowns and all that dumping yards, these all will also covered under your precincts because they are directly related to your factory, factory premises. So these all will be covered under your precinct. Then your entry gate, your exit gates, these all will be covered under your precincts. So all these your fencings and all your restricted areas, that these all will be covered under your definition of precincts only. So as a lawmaker, like what definition of factory you will give? Like factory is value, whether you will give definition to a factory that it is a closed wall structure, that is only factory. No sir, factory means the place where manufacturing is going on and the incidental place where the activities connected to that manufacturing is also happening, and all the nearby surroundings, boundary areas where all the works are directly incidental to that manufacturing process, that will be covered under factory. So you have to define factory as a whole ecosystem. To give broader definition to applicability of the law, you have to define factory as a whole concept. You don't have to define factory in a narrow concept. You have to define your factory as a whole ecosystem. Whole ecosystem should be your factory. So general principle, premises is broad, precinct is and narrower enclosed spaces. Factory may exist with or without precincts. Key test connection with manufacturing process. So if that precinct is directly connected with your manufacturing process, then it will be covered under definition of factory. However, otherwise it will be not covered under your definition of factory. Factory may have precincts or may not have precincts. Okay, if it is having precincts, then to cover it under the definition of factory, that precincts must be directly related to your manufacturing work. Okay, the precincts are broad precincts, enclosed space both tied to manufacturing. Factory law covers land, building and enclosed space tied to manufacturing. Next is Ardeshir H. Bhiwandi Lal versus State of Bombay. Ardeshir H. Bhiwandi Lal versus State of Bombay. Concerned with whether salt workers conversion of sea water into salt crystals fall within the meaning of premises under the Factories Act. Issue: does premises cover open land or only buildings precincts? Is definition of premises restricted to buildings and enclosed precincts only, or does it extend to open land where manufacturing process are carried out? Court held that legislature did not intend to discriminate between workers engaged in manufacturing in a building or those in an open land. So salt work is also a premises under the act. Premises is a generic term, open land with building or building alone. Premises is a broad term covering open lands and building. Salt pans to are factory premises. So that is also covered under the factories. It includes including precincts. Enlarging scope does not restrict the meaning. Even buildings need not have precincts. Principal: open land used for manufacturing qualifies as premises. Next case is Workman Delhi Electricity Supply Undertaking versus Management. Facts of the case: concerned with whether substations and zonal stations of Delhi Electricity Supply Undertaking qualify as factories under the Factories Act 1948. Workmen's employed their claim factory status. Does a factory exist when no manufacturing process is carried on? Are employees in substational zonal offices workers under the act? Court held that factory premises where manufacturing process is carried on, no manufacturing took place in substation or zonal offices, workmen employed therein and no part in manufacturing process, they are not workers under the act. Mere employment in a premises connected with the electricity distribution does not make it a factory. Manufacturing process is the decisive test. Factory status require manufacturing, not just distribution. No manufacture, no factory. So simple, so easy. Like if there is no manufacturing, then it will be not covered under the definition of factory. So write down the page numbers first. Write down the page numbers like we have completed up to case number 18 on page number 5, 19, 20, 21, 22. They are on page number 6. Up to 22, they are on page number 6. They are on page number 6. So write down these page numbers. This exercise is going to really help, my dear friends. Up to page number 20. Up to case number 22. They are on page number 6. They are on 6. Then 7, then up to case number 25. Up to case number 25, they are on page number 7. They are on page number 7. Then next is your 26, 27, 28, 29. They are on page number 8. Up to 29, they are on page number 8. So make sure you are writing these page numbers. This will reduce your lots of efforts while finding the case laws. Okay. So next is your next case is Employers Association of Northern India versus Secretary for Labor, UP government. Facts of the case: concerned with the sugar factory that operates seasonally. Question: does factory cease to be a factory during the off season when no manufacturing process is carried on? This is a valid question. Like if there is a seasonal factory, like sugar production of sugar is a seasonal activity, so whether this will be covered under the definition of factory for that season only, after that it will lose the status of factory. So let's see what court has given conclusion. Court held that ordinary must be interpreted with reference to intention and purpose of the act, not common parlance. Seasonal factories or factories with intermittent manufacturing do not cease to be factory during the off seasons. Principle: once a place is established as factory, its status continues even if the manufacture is temporarily suspended. Factory status persists despite seasonal breaks. Seasonal pause does not mean the end of factory. So seasonal factories, seasonal industries will also be covered under the definition of factory only. 10 or 20 workers, numerical thresholds for factory definitions, statutory requirements, section 2M of Factories Act. Premises where 10 or more workers are employed with aid of power and 20 or more without aid of power. Now this is changed. This case law is changed, so you don't have to read it. Now new limits are 20 and 40. New limits are 20 and 40. Okay. Next is Bharti Udyog versus Regional Director ESI Corporation. Facts of the case: manufacturing activities carried on in one part of the premises, other work carried on in another part of the premises. Question: does this division excludes the premises from being a factory? Example: cutting wood and converting it into planks. Issues involved: whether manufacturing process must be carried on throughout the premises, or is it sufficient if it is carried on in any part. Court held that fact that manufacturing is carried on in one part and other work is another does not take the premises out of the factory definition. Manufacturing process in any part of the premises is enough. Cutting, converting woods into planks, that will also be converted into manufacturing activity. So what is the hint that you will find? Cutting, converting wood into planks is equal to manufacturing activity. Manufacturing in any part is equal to factory only. One corner of manufacturer makes whole premises a factory. So this is how you can find your case laws. We have given you the hint here, okay, the case law and the hint, like one liners or two liners, so you can easily spot your case laws in your exams also. Next is Polytechnic Institution Workshop case. Facts of the case: workshop of a polytechnical institution registered under the Factories Act imparted technical education but also carried on trade in a systematic and organized manner, had power generating machines in operations. Whether such a workshop, primarily educational but engaged in organizational trade with machinery, qualifies as factory under section 2M of and 2K of the Factories Act. Held that workshop comes under the definition of factory. Manufacturing process was being carried on, presence of power generating machines was there, trade conducted in systematic and organized manner. So now whether this is educational or not, that does not changes the status. If manufacturing is going on, then it will be considered as your factory. Then it will be considered as your factory. Even educational institution, if engaged in manufacturing trade with machineries, can be treated as factories. Educational workshops plus manufacturing is equal to factory. Teaching with machines still makes a factory. Next is JK Industries Limited versus Chief Inspectors of Factories and Boilers and others. Facts of the case concerned with who can be notified as the occupier of a factory owned by a company. Company attempted to nominate an employee, not a director, as occupier. Then can a company nominate any employee as occupier, or it must be one of its directors? What happens if no director is nominated? Court held that in case of company owning a factory, only one of its director can be notified as occupier. Company cannot nominate any other employees. If company fails to nominate a director, inspector of the factories may proceed against any director, treating him as deemed occupier. Directors are liable for prosecution punishment in case of breach and contravention of this act. In case of company owning a factory, only one of its director can be notified as the occupier. Company cannot nominate any other employee. Next is Indian Oil Corporation versus Chief Inspector of Factories. Indian Oil Corporation versus Chief Inspector of Factories. Concerned with government companies owning factories. Question: who is the occupier under section 2 and 3 of Factories Act? In government companies, ultimate control lies with the government through the company is a separate legal entity. Can the company itself nominate an employee as an occupier, or does the occupier have to be someone appointed by the government with ultimate control? Court held that the test is who has the ultimate control over the affairs of the factory. In case of government company, ultimate control lies with the government. Therefore, person appointed by the central government to manage affairs of the factory are deemed to be occupied under this act. So when central government appoints someone, when central government nominates someone or appoints someone as the occupier of that factory, then that will be deemed to be the occupier of the factory under this act. Person appointed by the central government to manage affairs of the factories are deemed to be occupied under this act, are deemed to be occupiers under this act. Then Bears India Limited versus State of Maharashtra. Facts of the case concerned with hazardous chemicals and substances handled by Bear India Limited. Issue: proximity and exposure pose serious risk to public health and safety. Issues involved: whether courts can intervene to prohibit or strike down actions that endanger public health and life. How should overriding considerations of the health and safety be prioritized under the law? Conclusion: judges emphasized public health and danger to life must receive top priority. Whether there is a failure to safeguard this, court must step in using the inherent powers held at any action offending basic tenets of health and safety can be struck down or prohibited. Hazardous industries must operate under strict scrutiny. Public health overrides industrial convenience. This case this case is important. This case is important. Question can come from this case. Question can come from this case. Like they will make a case study that this is a hazardous industry and this is causing trouble to the local residents or the local citizens. Whether government can strike down this industry for the public benefit. So answer is yes. In the case of Bears India Limited, in case of Bears India Limited versus State of Maharashtra, it was held that any action offending basic tenets of health and safety can be struck down or prohibited. Then Associated Cement Cause Limited versus Sharma, issues involved. Does Rule 6 unlawfully restricts the management's rights to dismiss a welfare officer? Is Labour Commissioner concurrence valid under the law? Court held that Rule 6 is not ultra virus. Management must obtain concurrence of Labour Commissioner before dismissing, terminating the welfare officer. Before dismissing the welfare officer, they must obtain the concurrence of Labour Commissioner. Welfare officers are statutory appointees. Their protection ensures independence and fairness in welfare duties. Next is overtime wages and allowance. Govind Bapu Salve versus Vishwanath Janardhan Joshi, issues whether house rent allowance can be included in overtime wage calculations. Held that HRA payable to employees without accommodation cannot be taken into account for calculation of overtime wages of the employees provided with accommodation. Principle: overtime wages are based on basic wages components, not allowances like HRA. Issues employer required. Next is HMT versus Labor Court. Issues employer required workmen to work beyond maximum overtime hours under section 6444. Held employers cannot deny overtime wages merely because work exceeded statutory maximum hours. Principle: once overtime work is taken, wages must be paid for all hours even if excessive. Allowances like HRA are excluded from overtime wage computation. When you are giving overtime to some employee, then you don't have to give him if someone is claiming overtime wages. Now what is the rate of overtime wages in new labor code? That is twice the basic wages. Now you don't have to give him HRA, house rent allowance. You don't have to give them. You have to just give 2x of the basic wages rate. So that is justified and technical. That is justified. Obviously now you will not give HRA or you will not give any other allowance. Okay, you cannot deduct PF on overtime. Like that will be really very funny situation. You cannot deduct PF or ESI on your overtime. Overtime is on basic wages only. So that makes sense. Overtime's wages must be paid for all hours worked even beyond the statutory limits if employer required it. Like statutory limits, if statutory limits have prescribed that this much is the overtime permitted and the worker is working even beyond that overtime limits, so the employer has to pay that employer for that extra overtime beyond the statutory limit also. Okay, the employer has to pay him. Then next is Vasant R versus Union of India. Petitioners, women workers in mills and some in management, challenge the constitutionality of section 66(1)(b) of Factories Act. Provisions banned women from working in the third shift 10 p.m. to 6 a.m. Does section 61(b) violates article 14, 15 and 16 of Constitution, equality and non-discrimination, equal opportunities? Can employment be denied solely on the ground of sex? Court held that section 61(b) is violative of article 14, 15 and 16. Potential employment cannot be denied on sole ground of sex when no other factor arises. Provisions struck down as unconstitutional. Gender-based restriction on employment are discriminatory. Now in new labor codes, women can be employed beyond the prescribed time hours. Make sure that they have given a consent that they are ready to work at that working hours. Equality of opportunity must extend to women in all shifts including night work. Then Shri Suresh Kumar Jalan and Earth versus State of Bihar. Petitioners, facts of the case. Petitioners, directors of the Carbon Resource Private Limited, Factories Inspector investigated premises, found multiple violations of the Factories Act. Inspectors filed prosecution report against the directors. Chief Judicial Magistrate took cognizance under section 92 of Factories Act. Petitioners appealed to Patna High Court seeking to quash the order. Then can the directors of the company be held liable under section 92 of Factories Act, or is liability confined to manager or occupier only? Conclusion, Patna HC. Court held that under section 92 only manager or occupier can be held responsible for violation. Director cannot be penalized under this provision. Chief Judicial Magistrate order was quashed. Quest. Liability under section 92 attaches to manager, occupiers, not the directors. Directors are outside the scope unless specifically designated as occupier. So who has the primary liability? Occupier has the primary liability. Unless otherwise the director is specifically appointed as the occupier, he will not be held liable under this act. If he is specifically appointed as the occupier, then only he will be held liable under this act. Otherwise he will not be held liable. Then next case is P. Trivankarma Prasad versus State of Andhra Pradesh. Facts of the case: Deputy Chief Inspector of the Factories filed complaint against petitioner for violation of section 32A41 punishable under section 92 of Factories Act. Violation: failure to provide D-rings, one can trolley, side plates, ladders and helmets. Result: unskilled workers injured and some died during the hazardous work. Petitioner, occupier, managing director, manager held responsible for safety. Whether criminal petition filed by the petitioner against the factory inspector should be allowed or dismissed. Question of liability for failure to provide safety equipment. Court held that occupier, managing director responsible for neglecting safety measures. Criminal petition dismissed and quashed. Petitioner liable for ignorance and failure to maintain factory properly. Safety lapses, occupiers liability. No gear, no excuse, occupiers at fault. Occupiers will be at fault. The person who is occupier, the person who is designated as occupier, that will be held liable. So primary responsibility is of the occupier. If any director is designated to be the occupier, then he is liable. He is directly liable. Okay. So let's mark the page numbers. So this marks the completion of case laws of relating to your Factories Act. Your factory is part of OSHWC. Next will be contract labor. So next we will discuss in next class. So let's mark the page numbers. We have marked page numbers up to. Case number 30. So case number 30 onwards. Case number 30 was given on page number 9. Then 31, 32, 33. Up to 33 they are on page number 9. 9. They are on 10, and all the cases are on 10 except case number 38. All the cases are on page number 10 and 11. So like this you have to compile your case laws index. It will be very, very easy for you to find out the case laws. So I hope, my dear friends, you are finding these sessions useful. Make sure you subscribe the channel and like the video, and do share with all your friends who are pursuing labor laws and practice as their optional paper in CS professional program. Thank you so much.